Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about M. Night Shyamalan's 2024 film Trap. Spoilers for 2024 film Trap here. So today I want to talk about, as Dungeon Masters, we present villains. We present villains in every narrative, right? And traditionally we want a villain to be a good challenge to the player characters, to the Dragon Masters. When I say Dragon Master, I mean player. And we want them to be a good challenge to the player characters. But where do we want the sentiments, the sympathy of the Dragon Master to lie? With their own player character or with the villain? Now, the reason why we're talking about that is M. Night Shyamalan has really put out a masterpiece. It's a 4 out of 5 star movie, and it is spectacular. I cannot suggest this film highly enough. Every dungeon master should see this movie, and so you have this situation where he has crafted a movie where the villain is clearly a villain. So the villain is a suburban dad with children and a wife, with children who love him and a wife who loves him. They show that in the film. The wife loves him, the children love him, they do not wish him to be harmed, right? They really care for him, right? But he's also a serial killer. He chops people up in pieces and throws them out of his white van, and he's a full-on serial killer. Like, yeah, right? However, I really was rooting for this serial killer in the film. Now, why? Why would I root for a serial killer? Because he is what I am. He's a suburban dad who has children who love him and have a wife who love him. And from that perspective, I can fully understand him. Now, the other thing is, we all have things that we do that are wrong. And right, so we can, like, so you're like, well, can you excuse serial killing? I don't serial kill people. I certainly don't. I've never murdered anyone or really physically harmed anyone, right? But I definitely do things wrong, right? One of the things, like I would say the thing that I do wrong is I really love books. And if you give me a book or if you lend me a book, there's a good chance I will lose it. There's a good chance I will abuse it and it will be returned scuffed, folded, banged, dented, right? And there's also, I think subconsciously, I've kept a bunch of people's books, right? And at this point, I have discouraged people from giving me books. I'm like, from loaning me books. I want you to give me a book, but I don't like to borrow books. I really don't, right? But but I'm around people, and people know I love books. They come to my end, they're like, "You need to read this, right? Give it back to me as soon as you're done, right?" And so this happens to me probably 2-3 times a year. And honestly, what happens to those books, it's not good, right? Like, and I'm either going to keep it, or I'm going to lose it, or I'm going to damage it. Like, you will never loan me a book and get it back in good condition, ever. And I'm never going to change, right? From that perspective, I'm a book monster, right? So I could understand, I really had a huge amount of sympathy for this suburban father with children who love him and a wife who loves him, and happened to be a serial killer, right? Like, and at the end, I was really thrilled that that M. Night Shyamalan establishes that the serial killer father is able to escape, right? So he's free and out in the world, and I'm like, thank goodness that suburban father who has children who love him and a wife who loves him, who happens to be a serial killer, has escaped. And so my sentiment and my hopes and my goodwill is extended to this serial killer, right? Like, and that's amazing. That is an incredibly well-written script, right? And I think it's definitely worth exploring in Dungeons and Dragons. Now, if you're a new dungeon master, you should definitely not try this. But if you're an experienced dungeon master, I think it is very much worth our time to learn how to put the sympathies of the Dragon Masters where we want them to be. And that may be at another Dragon Master at the table, or on the Dragon Masters themselves, or on us, the dungeon master, or on a non-player character, a dungeon master character. And it can even be a dungeon master character who happens to be a villain. I think this is a perfectly crafted movie. I think M. Night Shyamalan worked hard to make sure that everybody was rooting for the serial killer in this film, and he's made the perfect, lovable, highly respectable, highly applaudable serial killer. That's not easy to do, right? Like, and we strive to push narrative farther than it's been pushed before, right? So the reality, and also I have to say, Josh Hartnett crushed it in this movie. He did a fantastic job of making us really see the human part of this serial killer. He's a mother's son. He's a suburban husband. His children love him. His wife loves him. He just happens to be a serial killer and chops up a bunch of people and throws their body out of his white van. Right? It's just part of him. Right? It's not all of him. Are we defined by the worst thing we do? Right? And so if you as a dungeon master are ready to push your narrative beyond the limitations that have been proposed by society, it is absolutely worth it as a dungeon master to see M. Night Shyamalan's 2024 Trap, starring a perfect role portrayal by Josh Hartnett, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.